This next segment I want to talk about the best arrows and broadheads for whitetail hunting. And everything that we do gear-wise is debatable. So people have opinions. Some of those opinions are based on experience. Some of them are based on testing. I hope that my opinions here are based on both of those. My own experience in the testing that I've done. Let's start with the arrows. I'm a huge fan of small diameter arrows. And I'm holding the FMJ right here. That's the 5mm diameter size. Easton also makes a 4mm injection, which is even smaller. There are a couple of benefits of the smaller diameter shafts. The most important one to me is the fact that they penetrate better. The smaller the diameter arrow, the better it penetrates. It just has less resistance when it's going through the animal. Obviously, we're going to come back and have a similar discussion on broadheads, but let's start with the arrow. Small diameter is better. The other advantage of the smaller diameter arrow is it has less surface area, so when the wind is blowing from the side, it doesn't have as much surface area for the wind to push against, so it doesn't drift as far. So you get a little bit better accuracy under a wider range of conditions. Some other testing has shown that the smaller surface area also leads to better retained velocity downrange. So if you're taking longer shots, you're going to carry the speed of the arrow better downrange with a smaller diameter. So those are the upsides to a smaller diameter arrow. I like the FMJ. It's very straight, very durable. So that's my selection within the smaller diameter category. And let's talk real quick about weight. Let's not have this discussion about arrows without talking about the best weight. Again, we're going to get into the area of opinion, and it's going to be debatable, but over the years I've come to the conclusion that speed is more important to a point than what people will give it credit for. And that's really because of the string jumping aspect of the deer that we're shooting at. So, for every 10 or 15 feet per second that we can increase our arrow speed, we reduce the distance that deer can drop correspondingly. It's going to be small, but every inch matters. If you hit just a little bit high of the lungs and the deer gets away, or you hit square in the top of the lungs and you kill the deer, you're going to be happy for those extra 2 or 3 inches that you picked up by shooting a faster arrow. So I like a finished arrow weight that's somewhere in the 5.5 to 6 grains per pound of maximum draw force range. So let's say you're shooting a 60-pound bow. See if I can do this in my head. 5.5 grains times 60 would be 330. I think that's right, 330 grains up to 360 grains would be sort of I won't say it's an upper limit, but that's a nice range for a fast arrow for whitetail hunting. So if you're shooting a smaller diameter and a little bit faster arrow, you get the best of both worlds. You still retain a lot of penetration capability on impact, a little bit faster delivery so that the deer doesn't have the opportunity to drop quite as far during the shot. So keep that in mind. I mean, these are like I said, all aspects of gear selection you're going to find a lot of different opinions on this. These are mine, so take it for what it's worth. Coming back around to broadheads now, I've always been a firm believer that penetration is more important. Shot placement is most important. Second most important is penetration, and third most important is how much damage you do on impact. So I've always put mechanical broadheads ahead of fixed blade heads, just from the standpoint of accuracy. Again, debatable. If you have a perfectly tuned bow, perfectly tuned arrows, you don't have a lot of flaws in your shooting form, you're probably going to do pretty well with fixed blade broadheads. They may penetrate slightly better than a mechanical head. Mechanical heads on the market are very good now. So I've made that switch several years ago to mechanical broadheads just for the accuracy purposes. So the cutting diameter now is the next trade-off, and you're looking at tissue damage versus penetration. And the larger it opens up, the more resistance it's going to find when it hits the animal. So it's going to have to carry more energy, or literally it's just not going to go in as far. And you'll see that, especially with some of these broadheads that open way up, a 2.5-inch cut. I mean, that does great on soft tissue hits. But when you get into the shoulder, or if you have to shoot down from a steep angle, and you got to go through some of the heavy tissue at the top of the deer in order to penetrate far enough to get into the vitals, you're going to find that these broadheads that open wide are going to limit your penetration too much, and you're not going to get a clean kill. You know, at the very least, you're not going to get an exit hole, which makes blood trailing a lot more difficult too. So I'm a fan of broadheads that are in the 1/4 to 1/2 inch cutting diameter range. So let's talk about specifically the ones I'm going to be shooting this year. Wasp has a couple models that I really like. This is the Select Cut model, and it goes anywhere from 1.5 to 1 3/4 inch cutting diameter. So this one you can adjust it. I like the option of having that 1.5 inch cut. So I'm thinking I'm going to play with that, with the 1.5 inch cut size on the Select Cut on the Jak-Hammer, which is Wasp's 3-blade mechanical. And they also make just a non-adjustable 1 1/4 inch cutting diameter Jak-Hammer, and that might be the one I fall back on, for my go-to head. But again, I don't want to overstate this, I guess, because you're going to get tired of hearing it, but there's a lot of different opinions on this stuff. And I'm not saying that in every situation I'm right, but I've been doing this for a really long time, and I've studied a lot of this stuff, and I've looked at a lot of research. And for whitetail deer hunting, I'm not talking about Cape buffalo or antelope. I'm talking about the stuff that we do. This is the combination of broadhead size, weight, arrow shaft diameter, arrow weight that sets up best for me.